I should just have Colin Freeland do my sermon. I think he knew more about the passage than I did. I had to... Good? All right. I didn't do it. So I don't know how many of you know, but I actually started off my college career as a biology and chemistry major. More specifically, I was pre-med. Then, to my mother's great dismay, I changed my major to psychology and religion midway through my second year. Now, you might say that my first year of college was wasted. However, I gained so much knowledge about myself and what I really wanted to do with my life. And one of the major lessons I learned from my chemistry classes that really stuck with me all these years was actually kind of by accident, and it has nothing to do with chemistry. I had a chemistry teacher that every one of her advanced science classes had to take a lesson and teach it to elementary students. She divided the class into groups and should give them a pretty complex lesson that they had to give. Now, there were many students who were doubling science and education, so they were going to become teachers. But the majority of us were either pre-med or going into pharmacy school or going on in more advanced sciences. So I was actually very confused. Why this professor would assign this in every class every year? It seemed like a waste of time to me. And also, we all know group assignments are the best, right? So I asked her, what was the purpose of this assignment? She simply stated, to teach a complex idea to a child, you must first completely understand this complex idea. So this summer, we're going through Jesus' parables. Jesus used to teach his disciples. He took complex ideas and he told them in a way that everybody could or maybe understand them. This was a pretty common practice during Jesus' time, and storytelling continues to be a way that lessons within the Jewish tradition are passed down. But what I love about this tradition is the sacred storytelling. It's the fact that in each new reading, there's something new to discover. The story itself can reveal something new in each person depending on their social location, their age, and the time period in which it's being told. Jesus told stories in terms that spoke to the culture and knowledge of those who were listening. So, building upon this tradition and this lesson that I had learned by my chemistry teacher, I have taken this story and a retelling I found on sermonsforkids.com and adapted it to our current setting. To fit our current culture, the story takes the character of the landowner or the master in the story and turns them into a boss, someone who owns a construction business. The servants become employees. The talents or the money become toolboxes filled with tools, each one bigger and consisting of more tools than the last. The first employee used the tools to build a homeless shelter because he knew his boss cared about the homeless. The second repaired houses of the elderly because he knew his boss cared about taking care of the elderly. Each were rewarded with powerful positions in the company. Now the third employee, he took the tools, hung them up in the garage, kept them safe and pretty, and never used them. I think we all might have a couple tools in our garage like that. He never put them to use helping anybody that the boss cared about, never used them for the exact purpose that they were designed. He kept them in pristine condition. He was scared to mess them up. He was afraid to break them. He was afraid to use these tools and somehow fail. So he didn't even try. Instead, he presented the unused tools to the boss and was fired for his lack of action. So I think my favorite part of the retelling of this story is the use of the tools. It's a context that we can understand. In the original Greek, we learn the word used is actually talentonta. Sorry, Samaritans are my Greek professor. It's a little rusty. The root word for that is talentoton. This was a measurement of gold or silver, and as we learned from Colin this morning, there's 15 years of wages for a worker. So one worker got 15 years of wages, one worker got 30 years, and one got more than you could spend in a lifetime. Then during the Middle Ages, the popularity of this story actually led to the development of talents as God-given gifts that were possessed. I bet you can hear the commonality in those words. So the two common interpretations of this passage translate the word to either be a large sum of money or special talents that were given to you by God. However, for our context and for our modern interpretation, I really like the word tools. I feel like the concept of tools encapsulates both meanings. The tools that are given to us by God, whether that be monetary, a talent, your social location, your learned knowledge, or your societal privileges. These are all things that can be used to build the kingdom of God and shouldn't be left unused. In this story, some people are given a lot. The first are given 5. The second are given 2, and somebody is given just 1. None of us are left without tools. None of us are left without things to continue to build the kingdom according to our ability. So the third servant or employee was given just a third of what the first was. You know, it almost makes sense as to why he felt like he had to hide his tools. Maybe he didn't feel that he was trusted as much. Maybe he didn't feel like he had as much to offer. Maybe not as much was expected from him. Personally, I sympathize a lot with the third servant. Being given something of value, even of relatively little value, I would be very careful to make sure that it was kept new, that it wasn't lost or destroyed or damaged. Not really a gambler. My dad took my sister and I to his favorite casino for our birthday so he could bet on horses, and he gave us each $100 and told us to have fun. I left with $100. When I was younger, I collected porcelain dolls. I'd put them on a shelf. I'd put a clear box around them to make sure they didn't get dusty, and I never played with them. So when I read this passage, I relate really hard to the third servant, and I was shocked at the harshness of the master. Where was the understanding? Where was the on-job counseling? We know that this passage is about making sure that we use the tools that are given to further the kingdom of God. That we are given these tools and we shouldn't hide them, we shouldn't bury them, they are meant to be used. We, as humans, tend to bury our treasures. We tend to hoard. But I find myself needing to know why the boss got so mad. It seems unfair. The servant played it safe and he didn't lose anything. Then I wonder, what if the other servants had invested everything and lost it? If they had taken the same wealth, invested it, and lost it. If they had built those buildings and it didn't end up helping the homeless, or it didn't end up providing enough care for enough people. If their master had returned and they had nothing to show for their efforts, would they have been the ones to be punished? I honestly don't think so. They would have been applauded and rewarded for their efforts to use those tools that they'd been given, to have tried at the very least. You see, this passage isn't about making sure to double your wealth or making more money in the stock market. This passage isn't about making sure that your talents are constantly on display or letting people know how much knowledge you possess. This passage is about making sure you use those tools you are given to further the kingdom of God. Yes, but even more importantly, this passage is about not letting your fear of failure become a hindrance to your life and to the furthering of the kingdom of God. To not let your fear drive your decisions. To not allow the fear of what might, could, maybe, possibly, might happen. Not to let that stop you from investing your tools into developing something better. The third servant let his decisions be decided based on fear. Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you did not scatter. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talents in the ground. To hide your money, hide your gifts, hide your privilege. To stick your head in the sand and pretend that you couldn't help, even in a small way. He assumed the reaction of the master to be negative if he were to act upon the tools given to him. He was fearful of what would happen if he invested the money and lost it. The servant was so driven by fear that he didn't see any other safe option but to bury the money. And yes, he didn't lose anything, but like we just heard, money is not seeds. He didn't allow a place for any growth. If we bury our tools, there's no opportunity for growth, and that is the sin of the third servant, to take away the opportunity for growth to the kingdom. It turns out that the greatest risk of all is to risk nothing, that the greatest risk is to stay home and keep all your tools that you are given hidden away out of fear of losing them. The greatest risk is to be led by fear, miss the opportunity to live, to remain a biology and chemistry major because the unknown is too scary, to stay in Chicago, to let fear stop you from investing in the world or following the call that God has placed on your heart, to hide from helping others, to run from your responsibility in helping to create the kingdom of God, because that can be a very scary thing. The greatest risk is to turn a blind eye and not care, to not live fully into your humanity or your potential because of what might happen. While I was scrolling on Facebook the other day, my favorite pastime, I came across a story that I'd like to share with you that you might be familiar with. A woman standing in line at a grocery store ended up behind somebody paying for their groceries with food stamps or electronic benefit transfer, EBT. There are a few items left that EBT doesn't cover: diapers, toothpaste, and the like. The total was around $30. The woman desperately started to look in her purse to try to find the money to pay for the purchase. It was clear that she did not have enough. Being in a place that she could offer help, the woman behind her paid for her entire purchase. After thanking her for her help, she left. The next person in line loudly said, "You know, that was probably a scam." She knew she didn't have enough. She wanted somebody else to pay for it. And the woman's response was, "So what? If she needed help and I had the means or the tools to help, what does that matter?" She took a risk. She didn't know this woman in need, just that she was in need. And she had the tools to help, and she did. This woman didn't lean into the fear that she was being scammed or this woman had played her. She offered help without a second thought of how it would affect her or if this woman had planned it all along. Now, generally, our faith does not come at much personal risk. In fact, we often talk about our faith and the church as a place of comfort. But in this story, Jesus is calling us to take risks, to expand our responsibilities, to put ourselves out there to help others, to do good recklessly. Each of us has been given tools, even if we think they are less than the tools of others. Each of us lives in a world that is hurting and in need of help. So I ask you, is your faith risky enough to put those tools to work? To do good recklessly?